Writing is about the process. It's about listening and recognizing remnants of your story in the stories of others. When we share our stories with each other, we share the resonance of the human experience. The By Firelight podcast is your invitation to join our circle, a circle of writers, poets, seekers, and storytellers as we capture our living in words. This multifaceted living with joy, grief, love, growth, and loss is shared among us in your legacy, your story. The things you choose to do with your days as they unfold matter here. I'm your host, Betsy Delzer. I'm many things, but in this gathering, I'm a painter, poet, and writer, and I'm honored to be your guide through these episodes. Together, we'll find our muses in the rich and heart-expanding conversations with incredible guests, many who are like minds and all outrageously inspiring hearts. When you press play, you're here in the circle to share this space with us. By Firelight.
A former lawyer and Silicon Valley executive turned author and investor, Cecily Mak helps people create undimmed lives of presence and intention, free from the stigma of addiction and the patterns of avoidance that keep us from living fully. Her book, Undimmed and the 8 Awarenesses Framework, are designed to help people break free from unhelpful habits before addiction takes hold, with compassion, care, and high regard for the beauty of change from the inside out. Well, Cecily Mak, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here.
I can't wait to tell you how I found you. But before that, I'm just curious, as a form of introducing yourself, if you were to think about a younger or older version of yourself and what she might tell us today, what do you think she'd want to say?
I think it would probably be the same answer for both, because I feel like this is my lifelong karmic assignment, which is to listen to myself, to just trust myself. I look back on my younger years and I had orientations and curiosities and opinions, and I often questioned myself and thought there was a way I was supposed to be doing something. And I can see that I still do that a little bit in my own life today. And I can imagine an older version of me looking back on now and just saying, you've got it. Like, you just trust yourself, trust your own heart, listen to that own voice of yours inside.
I love that. There are so many guests who answer similarly in the sense of like, she would say the same thing. And I think that that's really, it's compelling in terms of the connection that you have to yourself, both, the little version and the older version. I love that. So thank you. So here's how I found you. Okay. I'm a huge Young Pueblo fan, big time. And I was just looking for Diego on podcasts, and I was struck by the title of your podcast, which is also the title of your book that we're going to be talking about. And I was like, what is this? And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he like your first guest on that podcast?
He was, he's in the first season and he's early on. Yes. So
yes.
For sure.
So I listened to that and I was like, who is this brilliant light beam? And then I just started following your work and have become a fan in my own right. So excited to have this time together.
Thank you. Yeah, he's such a dear, and he's been such a wonderful friend, and we're also professional partners and supporter, and he's really encouraged me to continue this work. And that podcast episode that you heard was really fun, I think, for both of us, because we got to dive in a little bit into a shared story we have. We have very different backgrounds and very different lives, and we're 20 years apart in age and all that. But he had his own personal version of undimming, which is so compelling and doesn't really make its way into a lot of his poetry. So I was very grateful that he took that invitation to share kind of the intimate, understory of how he came to where he is today.
Yeah, he really did. It was a different kind of podcast. I've heard him several times just because I'm always like able to extract these nuggets and life learnings from him. Yeah. And it was a different kind of vulnerability that I really appreciated listening. So Undimmed, let's talk about that, because it's actually stitched into, I guess the way I want to say it is how I want to live my life. I the word itself, I hadn't thought of dimmers in the way that you presented them in some of your conversations. And so I'm so excited about this book, but it's like, it's really come full circle into my own life. So I'd love to hear just the journey to that word and your clear life, all of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm happy for you to be on your own undimming exploration. It's always really fun to hear that. And I hope to hear your version of it at some point.
Yeah.
I never really set out to be in this arena or be an author or come up with this type of an approach to things. This body of work, whether it's the podcast or my writing or other efforts, are all the product of lived experience that ended up needing to be birthed in some way into what we now refer to as Undimmed. It was truly wildly organic. And, the shorter version of how it all happened is that I grew up with a mother who was herself gravely dimming. She, bless her heart, endured just some real pain and difficulty early midlife, maybe early 40s, and didn't have great tools to handle it. So my adolescence and years beyond were very much characterized by trying to navigate a complicated relationship with somebody who was suffering, who I loved deeply, who didn't have the capacity to handle or evolve away from or heal that suffering in any way other than by just kind of stuffing it down and what I refer to as dimming it. So she used prescription drugs. She was a habitual drinker, and it took a long time, but she eventually died of alcoholism in 2011, esophageal cancer. And I kind of was carrying along, living my overperformant life. That's a whole nother story for another day, but, functional mom, executive lawyer, blah, blah, blah. And I noticed that I had really been treading in her footsteps. And I had been using my own dimmers, which were also alcohol and overwork and achievement, to not tune into and feel or address some of the difficulties in my own life, which were different, but also significant. And when I took a 30-day break from drinking in 2017, things started getting really clear really fast. And that started what had ended up being a lengthy journey of understanding why I was dimming in the first place, how we as a culture use things to avoid pain or discomfort, a deep sense of self-grace and compassion so that it wasn't a judgmental or damning or guilt or shame-filled journey, but rather one of compassion and understanding and curiosity. And throughout the process, I also unearthed how limited the resources are out there for people who maybe want to make these types of changes with something such as alcohol without identifying themselves as an addict or even sober or in recovery or any of these kind of heavy labels that we have in our culture. So that was how I stumbled into this work. That's my own personal efforts to find and ultimately craft a solution that worked for me.
I, as somebody who frequently did like 30 days off, I'd do the dry January, dry July. I ended up having someone that I called my sober sister because we would do it together. And I, in 2023, did 3 months, which turned into 5 months. And then most recently, and this is where I've been listening to more of your work and really intrigued by this, inspired is a better word, I committed to a sober school year. So I'm in my 25th year in public education. And I was like, you know what? I just want to do this longer, like hold a longer container and be curious through it.
Yeah. Amazing.
And I will say, like, it's, I don't know, I think I'm 60 some days in or something like that. And I'm too in that camp of like, I was walking around in a little bit of a fog, and I was like finding moments where I was making some compromises about my life and some compromises about the relationships I was in. Like I was compromising whole life satisfaction and really like the well-being in my relationships because I could dim it out, right? I could just okay, that's there. The rationale, the reasoning of why this isn't good is there. But after a glass of wine, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah. No,
Right?
I know this well. I hope I can swear on your podcast. I refer
Yes.
to that as the fuck it muscle. Like
Yes.
my fuck it muscle was very well developed when I was, quote, socially drinking. That ability to kind of turn that on and, you know, abandon commitments I'd made to myself, kind of go sideways on decisions I had made about certain health practices, you know, classic, I'm going to run 3 times a week for the next 30 days. And you get to week 2 and you've had a glass of wine and you're like, yeah, well, I'm definitely not going to run tonight now. And that, you know, it's just sort of this one thing after another. Or being online. This is a classic one I hear from people a lot. You know, just fuck it. I'll just buy this thing or buy these plane tickets. Or, you know, you kind of can perpetuate a lot of financial chaos in your life with those behaviors as well. But I want to acknowledge you for that year or the school year commitment. I didn't mention that in capturing a bit of my own journey, but that was a really a deal sealer for me. I did 30 days and then I extended to 60 days and then 90 days. And then over the holiday season in 2017, I decided, well, I obviously don't have a problem with alcohol. I'll just drink at this party and maybe a little bit at that party. And we host this awkward dinner and I'd love a glass of wine during that awkward dinner. And by the end of December, I felt terrible. I really missed the incredible sensation that you're probably in now of 60 days alcohol free. Feels pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And so I decided to take all of 2018 off. And that's a really great extension of these 30-day or 60-day experiments. The way a friend put it to me at the time was that way you get to sort of experience the full arc of your life clear. So the birthday and the holiday and the sad day and the meal with the friend who always has a couple drinks, and you have the full menu of experiences and the opportunity to notice how they're different with or without alcohol. And for me, by the time I got to the end of that year, I had many people in my life saying, oh, how are you going to celebrate? You hit a year, your New Year's is going to be massive, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't even imagine going back at that point. It was so nice to be free of that internal conversation of if, when, how much, how long. Just the yes, no made life a lot easier for me. And I still have this thought, you know, I'll drink again if I want to. We have plenty of alcohol in our house for guests and whatnot. And it's not even a thing anymore. It's the more distance that has grown, the more freedom I feel like there is. So I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
That's a fun journey to be on.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's so many things in a school world where we like encapsulate this like 9-month period of time as its own period, like its very own entity. So I feel like it makes perfect sense. And I've moved into just a state where I'm like, okay, we're here to feel this all the way through, sister.
So anything that's kind of percolating and feeling clear now that you're not dimming at all and you're feeling and seeing it all maybe in a different way?
I think, I am a sensitive person. I think that what I feel, I sometimes even feel myself like looking around, like, is it going to show up? But it's the sadness is gone. So there's a sense in which this like kind of weight that was lingering for me or some sadness is just, it's dissipated. And that for me feels like the noticeable, and yet I'm soon enough into it that I'm like, it still could come back. But I feel like the amount of like social drinking and just whatever everyday drinking that I was encountering was enough to really like drag me down. So I'm noticing just like, whew, that's like the heart is expansive and feeling like, oh, I'm just lighter.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's beautiful. Good for you. And there are hard parts too, right? I mean, it's like you also.
Oh God. Yeah.
There's I don't want to ever paint this as a big sunshine and rainbows, joyful thing, because we use self-medication for a very good reason.
Yeah.
and it's not all terrible or something that needs to be addressed. I mean, we self-soothe in a whole variety of ways. And the human experience is complicated and difficult. And we have hard days and we have drama with family and friends. And, gosh darn it, sometimes it's really nice to just sit down and have a drink and not deal with it for a few hours.
Mhm.
I really understand that. And so I think that's one reason why people end up getting into deeper work when they pause, because they're all of a sudden confronted like, oh, I've been avoiding this for years for a reason. Now am I going to actually move through it? Awkward. Do I have the right support system? Do I have the right help? Am I ready? Am I
Yeah.
tooled? Am I strong? It's interesting.
Yeah. Am
Yeah.
I trying to replace, or am I kind of seeing it for what it is? Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
So I'm so curious about the story that's told on your website, cecilymak.com, around this idea that you took the 12 steps and then you rewrote them in a way that can you tell me about that? Because I
Yeah.
love you for that. Let's hear about it.
Yeah. Yes, I did. So when I was in my first, weeks and months of not drinking, it didn't take me long to realize how socially isolated I was. I had surrounded myself with a lot of alcohol-fueled events and gatherings, and even my profession, my family. So even though I was opting out, and even though I was still doing the things, I felt quite alone, and particularly alone between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. on weekend mornings when I was awake and fired up and rested and ready to go. And most of the people in my life were like, not yet. And so I attended, at the urging of a good friend, a handful of AA meetings, different ones, big ones, small ones, longstanding ones, new ones, women only, whatever it was. And I had been into some of the rooms in years prior in connection with other needs and efforts of friends and family. And there's something really beautiful about AA. I really want to acknowledge and honor that. Literally millions of people are living a better life today because of the program. And so respect. However, for me, I could not get it to click. And I kind of went in looking for community, looking for relatability, seeing what it was like to be in a space, in a circle with people who, like me, were also not drinking anymore. And so I had such a desire to find something that would be nourishing there. But the 12 steps themselves just continued to kind of rub me the wrong way. And, it started with the very beginning, this expression of a label and powerlessness, which were neither my experience. I didn't feel like I was an alcoholic. I didn't want to commit to sobriety for life. And I most certainly didn't feel powerless. I felt more empowered in those first weeks and months of not drinking than I had in years. And it wasn't just with relation to alcohol, it was every other area of my life. If I can make this shift, what other shifts can I make? And so there was this beautiful ripple effect where I was able to really kind of fully embody and make positive shifts across the board. And so I one day at home in my little cottage, I was in an in-between cottage shortly after my divorce. I opened up the Alcoholics Anonymous website and I copied the 12 steps of AA and pasted them into a Google Doc, and I started editing. I thought, these deserve an upgrade. There is room for improvement here. And so for years, I would periodically go back into this document and modify the language, change a sentence, retitle, retune, until several years later, they were 8. And they didn't feel like steps, because I don't feel like there's a beginning or an end to this journey. It's a way of living, in my experience. And so I started calling them awarenesses, because they were kind of like mantras I was carrying around in my own day-to-day experience of living clear. And that is how the 8 awarenesses came to be. I finally got to a point in late 2023 where they felt like they hadn't changed in a while. Like they had paused in their evolution, and they were complete. And so that's the version that's in the book.
Does that continue to be like a grounding for you, the 8 awarenesses? I feel like in the way that I think of 12 steps being kind of like something that is almost a mantra or something that people repeat and kind of put their stake in the ground around, do they function similarly for you?
For me, they feel more like a living set of tools that I have with me. They're very simple. And so I can recall them and apply them in a whole variety of contexts. And there's some that are my more regular go-to than others. It's not an approach that has a beginning, a middle, and an end per se. It feels more like a cycle and then a bit of a menu of things that we can go to at any given moment. So, for example, the first awareness is my life is better, clear. The second awareness is I choose what I consume. And that was a really big one in my non-drinking journey because I realized anything I was consuming was because I chose to consume it, and that there were many steps from noticing the option to bringing it into my being. And when I recognized how many baby steps and micro decisions there were along that way, it helped me see how many different moments I have to make different choices. Mm-hmm. And that one today, even though I'm not necessarily grappling with the choice to drink alcohol or not, I think about it in a really broad way, which is all of the things we consume: media, music, people, food, smoke, like whatever it is. And so when I feel frustrated by something happening in my body or in my system or in my life, I will often refer back to the second awareness and think, what am I bringing into my being that is contributing to this difficult experience? Mm-hmm. Recently, I was traveling overseas, and sugar was just a feature of our food for 2 weeks. It seemed like I couldn't avoid sugar. And I really felt the consequences of that when we came home. And I had to really go through that process again. And I was able to use the second awareness. Do you want ice cream? Actually, I do, but I don't. So I'm going to choose not to do that because of the result that I know I want. Or somebody reaches out socially and wants to spend time together. And I've noticed over time that maybe I don't feel that nourished after time with this person. It's more taxing or draining than positive. And so I can use some of my own kind of discernment and agency to choose to not bring that into my life in a gracious way. So it's definitely living, breathing work in my case.
Yeah, I love that. Is it fair to say you started with kind of your own journey, and then you didn't necessarily have, okay, I'm going to create the 8 awarenesses, and then I'm going to create this community. I mean, did it just unfold for you, Cecily? How was that?
How did that happen? Well, yeah, no, it's a great question. And again, I wish I could say there was some great design or planning around this. There was not. In April of 2018, when I was in month 4 of my 12-month year experiment, I was really being nourished by some of the voices on Instagram in the kind of alt sober space. So Laura McCowan and Holly Whitaker come to mind. They were in their early book writing chapters themselves and sharing very openly and beautifully online about their experience. And I was noticing these communities, mostly of women, but men and women, sharing and supporting each other in this exploration. And so I started an Instagram account. I remember it vividly, standing in my kitchen. It was originally Clear Life 108 with a nod to the Buddhist number 108. And I don't know where Clear Life came from. It just felt like that's how I felt. It felt like Clear Life to me. And I started engaging with that account with a variety of people in different ways. And truth be told, it was because I wanted to be anonymous. I wasn't really comfortable with the conversation around alcohol yet. I felt very judged and labeled by a lot of people who often responded, "Oh, I didn't realize you had a problem," or "I didn't know you were an alcoholic," or these kind of immediately revealing judgmental responses. And so I wanted to hide behind a different handle or identity, which I did. And the more I wrote and shared, the more I connected with people who were having a similar experience. It was so cool and powerful to meet people around the planet who were asking similar questions and learning similar things. And we were sharing images of our early mornings, or, confessing to one another where the really difficult pieces were and how do you navigate your first weddings, not drinking and whatnot. And then, as is often the case for people, and you work with a lot of authors and creators, sometimes we create to heal, we create to understand, we journal to process. And I started writing that year, and I wrote a couple pieces and published them on Medium. I also started what I hoped would maybe be a book of my own story, my own experience. And there was just a kind of a natural evolution from there. I ended up completing that book with the help of 2 different editors over 4 years, all the while growing my connections and relationships on Instagram, and eventually decided to not shop that book, but to shop what was the kind of the baby of that book. That book birthed the 8 awarenesses. It was through that journey that I developed this process, and had been sharing that on Instagram, had been sharing that in what I started as a monthly Sangha. I do a Zoom once a month for folks who are interested in this topic. And it's just been very organic from there. I've had moments of having certain people, Diego Young Pueblo being a great example of helping to elevate awareness around some of my work, but a lot of it has been word of mouth and people just sharing what's been supportive to them, and me getting to know people and learning from them. And it's been a great journey.
It really feels like the undimmed life is not something we can do in isolation, right? Like I see, whether it is through the traditional AA model or various groups. I mean, now that I'm kind of interested in this algorithm, it's everywhere that, it's sober mom life and sober this, sober that. And I think when you were speaking, the thing that I was really thinking about is that piece of like wanting to sort of hide behind Clear Life 108 and not necessarily put your name out there right away. There are people who are on the receiving end who are in a similar place, right? Like I can totally feel that in my body of like, I know we're talking about this right now, and I know I'll be sober when this podcast goes live. But there's like oh gosh, it's a whole new part of myself I haven't shared here.
Yeah. And that's so interesting to unpack, right? So can I ask, what is it that, what's the feeling? What's that emotion that you feel that's giving you that pause? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of fear of the label of like, or that just the wondering of like, oh, like did she have a problem, or kind of like, how much was she drinking? Why would you stop drinking? I live in Wisconsin. This is like a drinking capital of the country, Totally. And so I think probably what I'm experiencing is like some tentativeness and some fear around the wondering, which brings up a whole other issue, which again is in another conversation of like vulnerability of how we're seen, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I will say one of the things that kind of helped me tread away from that place was a really blunt conversation I had with an elder family member while she was drinking several glasses of Chardonnay. And I was telling her how awkward it was for me to be, the mom in my community that didn't drink anymore, and all this judgment, and how do I handle this and that? And she said, Cecily, you know what? No one cares. And I said, no, they really do. Their feelings, their opinions, people care. They ask questions, they gossip, whatever. I had all this like certainty around this topic. She said, they really don't. Like, they might have a moment or two of not liking that you're not drinking with them, or curiosity or awkwardness around their own feelings around your choices. But it's usually seconds. It's like, for most people, it's very, very minimal. And I think the journey for us in this is to try to believe that. I still try to believe that. I'm about to reveal a book to the world that puts my name and my face and podcasts and everything in this very blunt way, revealing some of the true awkwardness and, embarrassing moments of my own journey. And I so feel what you're feeling. Like, it is scary, but also it creates space for other people to do scary things. And my favorite feedback I get from people is, thank you for being so open about your process so that I felt safe starting mine. And that's amazing. The good and the bad, right? And I've heard your episodes, you go there with your guests. And I think people listen here because they feel related to and connected to, and there are no perfect answers. So it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm curious now about just the book that took 4 years that you shelved. Was there, I mean, I know I attract a lot of people like us who are listening to this who are also writer curious or writers and not even comfortable identifying as writers. There's such a process, especially when you're stretching it over a couple of editors and years. It was well after your 2018 kind of ended and you were carrying on your clear life. Did it feel just really clear that, yep, this isn't the book I'm going to push out there at this time? Was that a...
No, it was the result of a failure. So I left my last tech exec job at the end of 2022. My reason for leaving, I was the COO of a $3 billion crypto company. And I had told the CEO founder 9 months earlier that I wanted to leave for 2 reasons. 1, to spend more time with my family, and 2, to birth this book into the world. I wanted to find an agent and shop it and have this basically literary memoir published. And 6 days after my last email to the company in December of 2022, I got a breast cancer diagnosis. Wow. And so the first half of 2023 was treating breast cancer successfully. I think I'm fine now. But I had a lot of opportunity to really think through what I was doing, how I was doing it, and why. I also, during that period, at least towards the middle of the year, poured a lot of energy and time into finding an agent to bring this book forward, while also starting the outline of the next book. So by the time I was shopping this to agents, I had the full manuscript of the memoir, and then I had an outline for the second book, and thinking that was a good kind of package deal because publishers and agents like these things. And I had 5 different agents get back to me. 2 told me, nobody knows who you are and nobody cares. And so we're not going to shop a memoir. You're nobody. Like, go do something else, write another diary project. 1 wanted to immediately sign, which felt like a red flag, oddly. And 1 had some caveats. And then the 5th one said, the memoir is fine, but this next book is really, really interesting. And I would like to work with you in shopping the Undimmed Data Awarenesses project. Now, long story short, I ended up taking quite a bit of feedback on the memoir in the process and realizing that it does need work and it needs some evolution before it's world ready, if it ever is to be world ready. But I knew the timing was right for my life, for the interest in this topic, and the maturity of that project and its evolution when we decided to start shopping it to publishers. And it really, it felt like an alignment of the stars. I hate to say this because there's a delicate balance between when something's difficult, keep pressing, keep going, don't give up, yada, yada. But there's also the trust the energy of the universe. And sometimes things just happen somewhat organically and naturally without a lot of forcing. And this is one of those cases where things just fell into place very elegantly and very quickly. We ended up shopping the book to, I think we had 11 or 12 meetings, and we got 5 major publisher offers. And I was in a wonderful position of being able to choose who I wanted to publish. I chose Flatiron with Macmillan. I literally cried when I read the letter from them making me the offer. They really, really got it. But it took sort of being deeply humbled by what I thought was going to happen. Was it going to happen? And surrendering to, there is an energy here for this other piece of it. And now that I've written the book and it's about to be published, it's funny, it's actually the 8th awareness. The 8th awareness is service. And when I have moments of quiet and reflection about this process, I really think about all of this with the hopes of being helpful to some people. And I didn't envision it that way initially, but it feels so clean and right now that this is the way that it landed. And the memoir may never see the light of day, and I would be okay with that because I think I had to write that to be really clear on this piece.
Like not have that story or something lingering. It's like it's done, it's over there, and then you could kind of focus right here on Undimmed.
Yes, and I didn't really have the 8 awarenesses and the journey crystallized until I did all of the kind of healing and introspection work that the writing facilitated for the memoir. So, for example, going into the writing of the memoir, I had this certain event that I thought was the reason for my mother's core primary suffering. And in writing, I did some family research and inner research and deeper reflection around what led up to those moments. And I actually unearthed a whole nother piece of the puzzle, which now makes a lot of sense, and why she was the way she was and I'm the way I am. And this whole notion of trauma, which is a very important piece of the 8 awarenesses, and choosing to not necessarily identify with it, but to honor it and recognize it. And that wouldn't have happened had I not spent, the dozens and dozens of hours crafting those chapters about that understanding. So it was kind of part of the creation process, actually, to do the writing part.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So in writing this, as I'm hearing kind of you put pins in the map of timeline, did this one go a little bit quicker?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I had a very fleshed out outline when we shopped it in April of last year, so April of 2024. It was actually a 70-page proposal. So it was very rich and thorough. And then because this book, The 8 Awarenesses, each chapter, which is an awareness, starts with a personal story about how that awareness came to be, I was actually able to use big pieces of the memoir in crafting those chapters. So not only was the content and the whole framework super clear, but I had spent years reflecting on how I got to each of those awarenesses as well. So it flowed very easily once we were kind of ready to go and knew what it was going to look like. It was a very natural writing process, much less painful than the first one.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like, too, that little inner critic or the inner wanderer that I just mentioned about being self-conscious about, that sounds like I feel like it exists in all of us to some degree, but it's way back in the theater of your life at this point, right? Like in terms of the writing this book and then having this beautiful letter of acceptance of, being your publisher, et cetera. Does it just sort of feel like it's had its own life form that's felt really kind of like held and celebrated to some degree?
I mean, yes, but now I'm entering a whole new chapter with it. I mean, it's one thing to quietly and privately and singularly, and reminder to everybody, by yourself, write a book. Writing a book is one of the most solitary things we can do. It is way more time than we imagine. It is so many hours alone with your own thoughts and your own notes and your laptop or however you write. I did not know going into this how many weekends I would spend alone at my desk or in a cafe or wherever I needed to just be by myself with the process. So I feel like that piece is complete, but there's another big waypoint on the journey, which I'm in now, which is making it available to other people to read and myself being okay with the spectrum of reactions, both from people I know and strangers alike, and opening yourself and your story up to a broad audience that we don't know is varsity level vulnerability feeling for me at the moment. I actually had a great example. I was at my brother's home. He lives nearby. I was there for dinner on Sunday night, and I actually brought a pre-published copy of the book, and I gave it to him, left it with him, and we had lunch today. because we barely talked about him when we'd talked the whole family, but I didn't get to connect with him on Sunday. So I said, let's have lunch. And he showed up today and he said, so I read your book. I said, what do you mean? It's only been 2 days. And he said, I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing. I said, wow, okay, this is terrifying because he's going to be very honest and he's a true critic. And a lot of the journey is about what happened in our family. And so it's my kind of version of that story with our mother. And that I experienced all those feelings, like the excitement, the anticipation, the fear, the dread, then questioning him when he actually told me he liked it, wondering if he was being authentic or just being nice. It's just kind of on and on. And it was such a great microdose of, I think, what's coming in a book publishing journey. And I'll also note, tackling the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in a way that I have by offering kind of a reframe and a redo for the tens of millions of people who maybe don't find that a fit, but do want to make a change. It's risky. There are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to like it. And so for the last few years, I've been just trying to prepare myself for the inevitable spectrum of reactions that will be out there, and trying to use my own practice to just be an okay container with that. Let it move through the good, the bad, the praise, the critics, whatever it might be. So it doesn't feel neat with a bow on top by any means, to answer your question.
Yeah, I can feel that. I had Lodra Rinsler on the show, and there's this book that he wrote, Love Hurts. And I had picked it up in a moment where I was really lonely and really hurting. And when you were talking about this service aspect and really desiring to do this to help, that he came immediately to mind because that's also his intention and hope in his writing. And it was such a beautiful moment for me as I was interviewing him last year to just sit with this like human magnet and kind, deep, contemplative soul that he is. And then remembering like sitting crisscross applesauce on my like empty living room floor, just like holding that book and the stories and just like the comfort that it brought me,
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece, is that you're going to hear the spectrum. You're going to see the spectrum because of reactions and ratings and reviews and all the things that, you're going to be privy to because of who you are. And I wanted to just impart, like, there will be people like me, like sitting cross-legged on their floor, holding your book that you can only imagine,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the writing journey is such a deep and powerful experience. I now have a lot of people in my life talking about books they want to do and asking for inputs or suggestions or, advice, whatever it is. And I was so humbled by this process. I was also really moved by it in different ways. And I imagine you've had similar experiences. Sometimes you complete something and you just have to weep, for me, it wasn't the final manuscript or even a final moment of any kind. It wasn't expected. It was maybe just finishing one chapter or getting a message from somebody saying that something I'd put out there had a certain effect on them, or even the gesture of being criticized, and having the range of feelings that we have the capacity for as human beings in response to something that has come of the writing process itself is pretty magnificent, even if a book doesn't come of it. I think it gives us an opportunity to really reflect and go inward in a way that a lot of other things don't do. It is an art, of course, but it can be so intimate. And I love that vision of you sitting on your floor of the book and just experiencing it, because authors don't think about that enough, I don't think. There's a thing and it's out in the world and there's interactions online, and we don't realize there's the solitary experience of writing, but then frankly, on the other end, it's a solitary experience of reading. And no two people are going to read the same thing in the same way. And we just kind of have to trust in that. It goes in and we'll see what happens on the other end. So love that.
And then it's like this immediate thing, right? It's January 2026. And, I love your numbers when it's coming out 1626. I'm like, but yeah. I also, then it lives. Then it has a whole life like it might be a book that people pick up 30, 40, 50 years from now. And I love that too, that we kind of think about the immediate. I want to consider the listener or the, maybe a little bit tentative writer, tentative publish dreamer who's sitting on the edge of some ideas. And this might be akin to some of the people who have contacted you with some ideas. And what would you tell that person about just simply beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was advised a bunch of helpful things early on from my journey. First of all, I think creating a little bit of space to just experiment and explore is important. Most people already have a life that they're living when the inclination to start writing arises. So whether it's parenting or job or elder care or some other thing going on, it's not like you can look at your week and say, oh, well, now I've got these magically appeared 10 hours when I can start this new craft. So I would encourage starting with a little bit of ritual. For some people that might be every Thursday lunch hour, I pack a sandwich and I go to a cafe with my laptop and I don't open up my work communications. I just have my laptop and creative time. Or, a weekend a quarter, I'm going to go stay at my auntie's house where there's good Wi-Fi and I can kind of hole up in the bedroom and just do something, work on this or explore this. Or sign up for a writing workshop. That might be the discipline people need. In my case, for a very long time, I was up at 5 a.m. every day with my laptop with a candle. And it was the only way that I could, while raising little kids, working a full-time job, often as a single mom, have the quiet and spaciousness to experiment with writing. So this book wouldn't exist but for that. So I encourage people to find a ritual where they can have a little space. Another thing that I was advised to do is just start with no standards or expectations. I mean, the artist's way is a great invitation, similar invitation, but just don't think about it being a book. Don't think about your name being on it. Don't think about being a voice. Don't think about who's going to read it. Just start actually writing and let that come out of you without a lot of, criticism or structure or expectations. Just let it come through you. I had an editor that I worked with early on in the memoir process who, she was lovely. She asked me about some of my most poignant and important stories or things I knew I wanted to get out. And she had me list them. And then she assigned me essays, one essay a month. Just write an essay on this topic or on this story a month and then send it to me. So I was helped by the deadline. I liked knowing at the end of the month I had to send that. And sometimes it's just getting that kind of river flowing and really reducing expectations. And then one final thing, which is a little bit of a thread to pull on that last, is I found it very important to not overthink who, if anyone, is ever going to read this. I found myself editing my content very early on, thinking about if a family member read it or an ex-boyfriend or I don't know, just like mental about what people would think. Yeah. Just assume nobody else is going to read it. Just make it your private thing. You can always edit it later. You can always take things out later. You can remove names, whatever it is. So that was also very liberating for me and kind of getting going when I needed just to start.
I love that so much. Well, we're going to list all the ways people can find you and find this incredible book when it comes out in January. Is there anything that we haven't spoken to or about, anything left that you feel like I'd really love to say this to our audience in closing?
Oh, that's a great, beautiful question. I would just say for anybody listening, whether it's about book writing or a relationship with a dimmer or something helped you get to the end of this episode with some level of curiosity and interest, I think I would just invite that kindness with yourself in whatever it is you're exploring. I refer to self-grace in my book. The only way that I can describe self-grace is this gesture of putting your hand on your heart, like self-grace. So maybe tomorrow is 61 of your journey of not drinking and you have a glass of wine with a friend. I get those texts all the time. I screwed up. I was doing so well. I'm like self-grace. Like things happen. Today is a new day. Don't be so hard on yourself. Or I've been wanting to write this book for 8 years and now I'm taking on this new job and I'm never going to get to it. No. Just be kind, like be gentle with yourself. And I think there are learnings in each of these trials and steps. And I think we're all a little bit too hard on ourselves. And when you can, just put your hand on your heart. That would be my invitation.
Good. Well, I hope that comes back to you as this launches into the world, and you have any moments just hand to heart, and remembering the people sitting cross-legged holding a book that you may never get to the chance to meet. But I'm so glad that we had this time together. It's such a gift, Cecily, and I cannot wait to continue my clear life and to use your guidance through it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm touched, and thank you for your beautiful work. I really appreciate your voice and those voices you're bringing to the world as well. I feel honored to be among them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Awesome.
By Firelight is a Lit Path Studios production and is produced by Jamie Gale and Betsy Delzer. Music is by Legito Music and Pond 5. Thank you for being a part of our beautiful collection of stories.